I made my husband sleep in the garage on Christmas Eve, and what his mom said to him will live in my mind forever. I know how that sounds, but you need to understand what he did first. 2 days before Christmas, I came home from a grocery run to find 3 extra cars in my driveway and suitcases piled in my hallway. My husband Greg had invited his parents, his sister, his brother-in-law, and their 2 kids to stay with us for the entire week without telling me. The guest rooms were filled with storage boxes, we barely had enough food for ourselves, and I hadn't cleaned in days. I pulled Greg aside and told him I needed help getting everything ready, and he just shrugged and said, "My family isn't picky. You'll figure it out like you always do." For the next hour, I ran around like a maniac while Greg sat in the living room drinking the beers I had bought for Christmas Day. I hauled storage boxes into closets, stripped beds, and remade them with fresh sheets, and tried to figure out how I was going to feed 10 people for the next 5 days. His mother followed me around making comments like, "Oh, I would have organized this differently, but that's just me." His sister's kids were tearing through the house screaming while my own children stared at me wondering what was happening. Around 3 in the afternoon, Greg grabbed his keys and said, "I need to run out and grab a few things." I asked him to please hurry back because I needed help with dinner, and he kissed my forehead and promised he'd be quick. That was the last time I saw him for 8 hours. I texted him at 4 asking where he was and got back, "Traffic is crazy, be there soon." I texted him at 5 while chopping vegetables for a meal I had to triple in size and got nothing. I texted him at 7 while serving dinner to his entire family by myself, and he finally responded with, "Be home soon." His father asked where Greg was, and I had to smile and say he was running errands while everyone at the table exchanged looks like they knew something I didn't. After dinner, his mother cornered me in the kitchen and said, "You know, when I hosted Christmas, I always had everything done by noon." I just nodded and kept scrubbing dishes while his sister sat 10 feet away scrolling on her phone without offering to help once. Later that night, his father made me remake the couch 3 times because the sheets weren't tucked tight enough, and when I finally got it right, he said, "Greg's first wife never had this much trouble." By 11 o'clock, I had been on my feet for 8 straight hours without a single break, and I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the wall because I was too exhausted to even cry. Greg walked through the door at 12:06 with a stupid grin on his face and a small gift bag in his hand. I asked him where he had been, and he actually laughed and said, "I ran into Dave at the store and ended up at his Christmas Eve party. You should have seen their decorations this year, it was so nice." I asked him to repeat what he just said. He looked at me like I was slow and said, "Dave's party. It was really fun." I didn't realize how late it got. I asked him if he was seriously telling me that he spent 8 hours at a party while I was here alone with his family, and he rolled his eyes and said, "It wasn't 8 hours, don't be dramatic, and my family loves you, I'm sure it was fine." I stared at this man who had spent 8 hours drinking and celebrating at someone else's house while I hosted his family alone, and something inside me went completely calm. I smiled at him and said, "I'm glad you had fun. Hey, I think you left your mom's gift in the car. Can you grab it before you forget?" He walked right out through the garage door without a second thought. The moment that door closed, I walked over and turned the lock, then went to the front door and locked that too, then grabbed his keys and his coat off the hook and stuffed them in my closet. About 30 seconds later, I heard him trying the handle and then pounding on the door. "Babe, the door's stuck. Can you let me in?" I pressed my hand against the wood and said, "You can sleep out there tonight since you didn't want to be home for Christmas Eve anyway." He went quiet for a second and then started banging harder. "You're joking, right? Open the door." I said, "I'm not joking even a little bit." He started yelling, "Are you insane? It's freezing out here. My family is going to think you've lost your mind." I said, "Your family watched me do everything alone for 8 hours while you partied. They can think whatever they want." He kept pounding and yelled, "This is ridiculous. You're completely overreacting." I said I was sorry. I almost laughed because he had never actually apologized once. That's when I heard his mother's voice behind me. She was standing in the hallway in her robe with her arms crossed, and she walked right up to that garage door and said, "Gregory, if your father had ever pulled something like this with me, they never would have found his body. You should be thanking this woman for her mercy." Greg went dead silent on the other side of the door, and for a split second I almost felt bad for him, but then I remembered I hadn't sat down since he left. His mom walked to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of wine, and handed me one without a word. We clinked glasses while Greg banged on the door, but not one family member moved to let him in.